During Thanksgiving, my sister learned I had $12 million, and my family insisted I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. I'm Sarah, a 38-year-old woman, and I need to share this burden. Are you familiar with family dynamics where one child can do no wrong while the other feels invisible? That's my life. Everything was ordinary until I was 8. As an only child, my parents weren't overly affectionate, but they were there. Mom helped with my homework, and Dad occasionally took me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we managed. Then, one night changed everything. I remember my Aunt Kelly arriving at 2 a.m., telling me to pack a suitcase because Mom was in the hospital. My sister Rachel was coming, but something was wrong. She wasn't due for another 2 months. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits and hushed conversations. Rachel was tiny, like one of my baby dolls, but covered in tubes and wires. I wasn't allowed to touch her or get too close. That was when I first felt it, an invisible wall forming between me and the rest of my family. When Rachel finally came home, our house transformed into a sterile bubble. Mom became obsessed with germs, implementing industrial-strength disinfection throughout, with hand sanitizer stations in every room and relentless cleaning. The sharp smell of bleach still unsettles me today. But what truly affected me was this: whenever I showed the slightest sign of illness, I was immediately sent to either Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's house. A single sneeze? Pack your bags. A mild cough? Off to Grandma's. At first, I found it enjoyable. Grandma Marie baked cookies, and Aunt Kelly had an impressive collection of Nancy Drew books I worked through. But children aren't foolish. Eventually, you realize you're not being sent on adventures. You're being treated as a threat, as if your very existence could harm your precious sister. I tried everything to gain their attention in healthier ways. I earned all A's, but Mom barely glanced up from Rachel's latest doctor's appointment schedule. I won first prize at the science fair with a project on renewable energy, but Dad only asked if I could store the display board in the garage because Rachel was allergic to cardboard dust. Is that even real? The real blow came when I was 12. For months, I'd practiced for the school talent show, teaching myself to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. I know it's a bit cliché. On the night of the show, Rachel had a 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit fever, and guess who had no one in the audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Rachel's 15-minute flute recital, where she essentially butchered hot cross buns. By age 7, Rachel had outgrown her serious health issues, but that didn't stop her from exploiting the system. Headache? Stay home from school. Tired? Someone else, guess who, should handle her chores. Worried about a test? Mom would call the school to extend the deadline. I started spending more time in my room, immersed in books about art history and antiques. It's strange how life unfolds sometimes. My room became my sanctuary, mainly because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, making it the one place she wouldn't go. When she faked being sick, part of me felt grateful. At least I'd be sent to Grandma Marie's, where someone would ask about my day or show interest in me. Grandma sparked my passion for vintage jewelry with her remarkable collection of costume pieces, which she let me organize and catalog. Looking back, I should have seen it as a sign. The worst part wasn't even the obvious favoritism. It was how they rewrote history to justify it. Rachel needs more attention because she had such a rough start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands her sister has special needs. As a child, I couldn't understand why having a strong immune system made me less worthy of love. Looking back, I see how those years shaped me. The constant message that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient doesn't just fade away. But it taught me self-reliance. When no one checks your homework or cares about your achievements, you learn to be your own champion. High school, most people either loved or hated it. For me, it was my escape route. While Rachel built her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the foundation for my getaway. Nothing motivates you more than knowing no one else will do it for you. Remember how I spent hours organizing Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? That taught me the value of systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, I applied that mindset to everything. My desk at home looked like something from an organization magazine: color-coded notes, meticulously planned study schedules, everything in its place. Rachel teased me, calling me Rainman. Thanks, sis. But being invisible has its perks. No one tracks your failures or successes, so you can do whatever you want. I joined every club that didn't conflict with my part-time job at Carson's Diner. Thank you, Carol, the owner, for remembering my birthday when my parents forgot. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was where I found my voice. There's something deeply satisfying about dismantling someone's argument while staying completely composed. It also taught me negotiation skills, which I didn't realize would prove valuable later. I won state championships twice, but Rachel had soccer games, so my parents couldn't attend either competition. She was on the C team and didn't even play. In junior year, things got really interesting. I took the SAT and scored a perfect 1600, not just pretty good, but absolutely perfect. Fewer than 1% of test takers achieve that. I stared at the results screen for nearly 20 minutes, convinced it was a mistake. I rushed home to tell my parents, thinking this was big. Mom was in the kitchen helping Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went like this: Mom, look, I got a perfect SAT score. That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to focus. She has a big test tomorrow. Rachel chimed in, yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom added, Rachel, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. I still have the hard copy of those SAT results somewhere. They never made it to the fridge, but Rachel's C+ in English? That got prime refrigerator space with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. College applications were an adventure. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone, wrote my own essays, gathered my own recommendations, and managed all the financial aid paperwork myself. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, was the real MVP. My parents were too busy to help with the FAFSA, so I stayed late after school. Then the acceptances rolled in: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, each with a scholarship offer. I kept all the acceptance letters in a locked box under my bed, knowing what would happen if Rachel found them. My family would suddenly shift their focus to her, claiming, if Sarah goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone, or some similar excuse. The day I received my full ride offer from Yale, Rachel made the JV cheerleading team. Guess which event was celebrated with a family feast? Hint, I ate microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But that scholarship was my golden ticket: tuition, lodging, board, and even a book allowance, all covered. I could finally leave the house where I was either invisible or inconvenient. When I got my acceptance package, I went to my favorite spot in the local library, a fourth-floor window seat overlooking the park, and cried for an hour, not from sadness but from relief. At dinner, when I told my parents I was going to the University of Michigan, they were thrilled, but for the wrong reasons. Dad said, Michigan? That's so far. What if Rachel needs you? Mom added, I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are costly. Rachel, crying, chimed in, oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save money. Carol, bless her, always slipped me extra tips and ensured I took home leftover pie at the end of my shifts. She also taught me a crucial lesson: how to spot genuine people in a world full of fakes. Baby, she'd say, in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say. On move-in day at Michigan, my parents couldn't come, surprise, because Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead, helped set up my dorm room, and handed me a $500 envelope. Your Grandma Marie wanted you to have this, she said. She's so proud of you. I later learned Grandma had saved that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm, I vowed to build a life so remarkable that being overlooked would be unthinkable, not for revenge or to prove anything to my family, but for the 8-year-old girl sent to Grandma's for sneezing. College marked the start of something new. It flew by in a whirlwind of all-nighters, instant ramen, and glorious independence. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan, but my parents didn't notice. They were too preoccupied with helping Rachel transfer to her third college in 2 years. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. I landed an entry-level position at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. I'm using a pseudonym for obvious reasons, but those in the industry might guess the real name. It's a prestigious firm, dealing with high-end clients and old money transactions. I started in their estate sales division, cataloging the possessions of wealthy individuals after their passing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My first few months were routine, logging countless china sets, categorizing vintage furniture, and so on. Then came the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston, an elderly widow with no children, left behind what everyone assumed was a vast collection of costume jewelry, filling entire rooms. This is where my time with Grandma Marie proved invaluable. While sorting through the jewelry, an Art Deco brooch caught my eye. It wasn't flashy, but something felt off. The weight was too heavy for costume jewelry, and the clasp was far too intricate for a replica. I spent my entire lunch break researching vintage jewelry markers and signatures, staying late to access the company's antique jewelry databases. The more I investigated, the more convinced I became that this wasn't costume jewelry, it was authentic. As the new employee, I knew no one would take my claim of a potential treasure seriously, so I relied on my debate team skills and meticulously built my case. For 2 weeks, I spent lunch breaks and evenings studying Art Deco jewelry authentication, even using some of my meager savings for an online gemology course. Finally, I gathered the courage to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison, with a full presentation, complete with comparative images and historical documentation. The conversation went like this: "Sir, I believe we have something significant in the Kingston collection." Harrison, barely glancing up from his phone, said, "Sarah, we've already catalogued those as costume pieces." I replied, "I know. But these makers' marks match Cartier's 1925 signatures perfectly." Harrison, now attentive, asked, "Where did you learn this?" I said, I did some research." Long story short, the costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. Part of a limited collection crafted for European elites in the 1920s. After that, Harrison began to trust me, assigning me more artifacts to authenticate. Suddenly, my pointless hobby of sorting antique jewelry gained real significance. I immersed myself in learning everything about vintage jewelry, taking every affordable online course, spending weekends at estate sales, and keeping a notebook to document authentication techniques. My apartment resembled a jewelry scholar's dream, with walls covered in printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guidelines. The auction house started seeing results. I was identifying valuable items others overlooked, building relationships with collectors, and mastering the market. My commission checks grew, and for the first time, I wasn't just scraping by, I was saving money. My family remained strikingly indifferent. At Sunday dinners, which I foolishly still attended, the conversation went like this: Mom would say, "Sarah's still at that antique shop, right?" I'd correct her, "Auction house," and yes, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece. Rachel would cut in, "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I got at the mall." But I no longer cared. For once, I had found something entirely my own, something I excelled at, something separate from being Rachel's sister or the family disappointment. Then came the Rothschild collection, about 2 years into my time at the auction house. It was a massive estate from an old money family, generating significant industry buzz. I was on the team cataloging their jewelry collection when I spotted it, a seemingly ordinary Art Nouveau piece everyone else had missed. I spent 3 days researching it, barely sleeping. It turned out to be from a renowned French jeweler's private collection, thought to have been lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Harrison called me into his office. I thought I was getting a promotion. Instead, he said something that shifted everything: "Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." At first, I brushed it off. Start a business with what money? But the idea took root. I began taking on small freelance authentication projects on the side. Word spread about my keen eye, and private collectors started reaching out directly. One night, sitting in my modest apartment surrounded by jewelry manuals and authentication tools I'd slowly accumulated, I had a revelation: I could actually do this. I could build something of my own. So, I did what any sensible person would do. I took out a substantial loan against my car, drained my savings account, and rented a small office space in a less than ideal part of town. People believed in me. I must have been insane, and maybe I was. I turned a storage room above a Chinese restaurant, roughly the size of a college dorm, into my office. The rent was cheap because it always smelled like Kung Pao chicken, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat in the corner by the window. But it was mine. Those first few months were challenging, to put it mildly. Terrifying is more accurate. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat, calculating how many months until my savings ran dry. Loan payments felt like a noose tightening around my neck. My office furniture consisted of a card table from Goodwill and a chair I found on the curb, thoroughly cleaned. Don't worry. In the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and contacts are everything, and my time at the auction house had given me both. I started small, offering authentication services to local antique dealers. My fees were lower than those of larger firms, but my meticulous attention to detail began to build a reputation. Word spread. 6 months later, a pivotal moment arrived. A dealer I'd worked with at the auction house asked me to authenticate a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner wanted verification before selling. It was a massive collection, spanning 3 generations of a family. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, documenting everything. I discovered 2 exceptionally rare pieces that had been mistaken for later replicas. The owner was so impressed with my thorough analysis that she not only paid my fee but also offered a 10% commission when the pieces sold. That commission? $86,000, more money than I'd earned in the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Private collectors heard about my talent for spotting overlooked gems. Estate lawyers sought my expertise on inherited jewelry. Even my former auction house started sending me authentication work, I'm fairly certain Harrison was quietly spreading the word. Thank you, boss. By year 2, I hired my first employee, Jenny, a recent gemology graduate who reminded me so much of myself at that age, brilliant but overlooked because she was quiet. She's now my head of authentication and worth her weight in gold. The business grew faster than I could have imagined. We moved to a proper downtown office, leaving the Kung Pao chicken scent behind. And I built a team of specialists. I'd built a reputation for spotting overlooked treasures, uncovering valuable historical jewelry mistaken for costume pieces in dusty attics. But success brought its own challenges, especially keeping it hidden from my family. They still thought I worked at a quaint antique shop. At family dinners, Rachel would make snide comments. Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it. She'd say, while I'd just authenticated a $1.2 million Faberge item that morning. I'd respond, sure, I'll look into it. Mom would introduce me as my other daughter who works with old jewelry or something. While I'd been quoted in Forbes, thankfully, under my company name, and we'd recently opened our third office. Oddly, keeping the secret became almost fun, like a private joke. I'd sit through Sunday dinners in my Target clearance outfit, actually Chanel, listening to Rachel drone on about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I'd just closed a deal worth more than her yearly salary. I even played little games, wearing authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings to see if anyone noticed. They never did. Once, Rachel spent 20 minutes flaunting her $200 Michael Kors watch while I wore a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. The real challenge, though, was managing growth. By year 5, we had offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more time on planes than in my own bed. We'd earned a reputation for discretion, as many wealthy clients wanted their jewelry authenticated privately. The money was substantial, requiring us to hire a robust team of financial advisors. Still, I kept a modest lifestyle, a nice but understated house in a good neighborhood, a high-end but unflashy car. My one indulgence was my home office, state-of-the-art authentication equipment, a top-tier security system, and a custom-built vault that would make Fort Knox jealous. The irony? My family thought I was scrimping to help them. Mom would say, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out. She must be eating nothing but ramen to manage," while I'd just earned a commission larger than their mortgage from authenticating a collection. Success is strange. The more you achieve, the harder it is to explain to those who've always seen you as lesser. It's like describing color to someone who only knows black and white. They lack the context. By now, my company dominated the Midwest's high-end jewelry authentication market, our reputation solid gold, pun intended. Yet every Sunday, I'd drive to my parents' house, playing Sarah, the humble antique shop worker. The cognitive dissonance was absurd. Mornings were spent on calls with Dubai collectors, afternoons authenticating million-dollar pieces, and evenings at my parents', eating Mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel dominated the conversation with tales of her latest marketing triumph, usually something like delivering Herbis's coffee without spilling it. One Sunday stands out vividly. I'd just finalized a major deal, authenticating a lost Cartier piece that had sat in a safe deposit box for 40 years. The commission? 7 figures. I drove straight from the meeting to my parents' house, still buzzing from the success. Mom said, "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes look a bit worn." I replied, "Oh, you know, trying to save money, wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater chosen for its subtle look." Rachel chimed in, "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." Dad cut in, "Rachel, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I nearly choked on my pot roast, stifling a laugh. Around this time, I began sending anonymous monthly payments to my parents. Aunt Kelly told me they were struggling with Rachel's student loans and medical bills, and Mom casually mentioned they might have to sell the house. Despite everything, I couldn't let that happen. It was still the home I grew up in. So, I started transferring $5,000 monthly to their account anonymously. When asked, I said I was contributing $1,000 by living on rice and beans, and they assumed the rest came from Aunt Kelly or another relative. Rachel, of course, took credit for inspiring family to help. Watching her spend my money was something else. The funds helped, but they also had unintended effects. My parents began treating me with a strange mix of pity and patronizing pride, as if I were some noble charity case sacrificing everything for the family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending grew extravagant. She'd show up to dinner with pricey new bags, claiming they were outlet finds. They weren't. I can spot a real Gucci from 20 paces. She started taking lavish vacations, boasting on Instagram about her blessed life. I'm certain she used my support money for shopping sprees, but I stayed quiet. The irony was almost delicious. Then came the MBA drama. Rachel announced she wanted to pursue an MBA at another private university, only the best for the golden child. Mom called me in tears, explaining they couldn't afford it. I suggested, maybe Rachel could consider state schools. They have solid programs too. Mom replied, oh, honey, you don't understand. Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. But speaking of helping, could you increase your monthly contribution for a few years? I raised it to $7,000 a month. My accounts didn't feel the pinch, but watching them praise Rachel for taking initiative with her education while assuming I was surviving on ramen to help out, that stung. The real kicker? I was invited to give a guest lecture at the same business school Rachel wanted to attend. My family had no idea. The dean personally asked me to speak on luxury goods authentication and business growth. I had to invent an excuse for missing Sunday dinner that week. My achievements felt like part of a separate life, as if I were a corporate superhero with a secret identity. By day, I ran a multimillion-dollar authentication business. By night, well, on Sunday evenings, I was just Sarah, the disappointing daughter who worked at an antique shop. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving. The weight of the lie was growing heavier. Rachel made snide remarks about my career multiple times, Mom apologized to her friends for my modest lifestyle, and Dad kept suggesting I get a real job. I always knew it would end dramatically. I just didn't expect it to implode so spectacularly on Thanksgiving. It started 2 weeks earlier when Mom called, crying about her back pain. She'd been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the thought of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 guests overwhelmed her. I'd like to say I offered to help purely out of kindness, but honestly, I was tired of pretending her dry turkey was edible. I said, why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered. She replied, oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer. I assured her, don't worry about the cost. I've been saving up. Mom, concerned, asked, you're not taking out a loan, are you? I arranged everything with a high-end catering firm I used a catering firm I rely on for business gatherings. They produce exceptional work, the kind of food that makes you question why you ever cooked. It cost more than my parents thought I earned in 2 months, but I didn't care. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and I was in high spirits. I brought my laptop because I needed to monitor a major online auction in Hong Kong for a stunning Art Nouveau necklace. A client was interested in authentication if they won the bid. The lunch arrived on time, everything impeccably prepared. Rachel, predictably, had to comment. Store-bought stuffing, really, Sarah? Mom's is so much better, she said, from the girl who once triggered the smoke alarm making toast. Mom apologized to everyone for not cooking herself, but you could tell they enjoyed the meal. Rachel quieted down after trying the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than her weekly grocery budget. I stepped away during dessert to check my laptop. The auction was heating up, and I needed to be ready if my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had kept unchanged since high school, while Rachel's room had seen 3 renovations. That's when everything unraveled. I'd left my authentication program running with multiple tabs open, displaying various accounts and current deals. Rachel barged in without knocking, some things never change, to borrow my phone charger. She saw my laptop screen and saw her chance to expose her pathetic older sister. Smirking, she said, let's show everyone what Sarah's really been up to. Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and marched into the dining room. The big reveal, picture 20 people, aunts, uncles, cousins. My parents, stuffed with gourmet turkey and half-drunk on expensive wine they mistook for Trader Joe's. Rachel announced, time to see what kind of important work Sarah's doing on Thanksgiving. She flipped the laptop around triumphantly, expecting to humiliate me with some minor antique transactions. The room fell deathly silent. You could hear the fancy clock I'd given Mom for Christmas ticking, which she thought was a reproduction. My screen showed, current account balance, $12.4 million. Pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million. Company's quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Rachel's face cycled through 5 emotions in 3 seconds, landing somewhere between shock and nausea. She swayed slightly, whispering, this can't be right. Mom asked, Rachel, honey, what is it? Rachel's voice cracked, she's rich. Sarah's rich. Chaos erupted. If possible, the silence deepened further, then Mom started giggling, full-on, uncontrollable laughter. Mom said, don't be silly, Sarah works at that little antique shop. I stood up, carefully smoothing my simple cashmere sweater, which cost more than their monthly mortgage. Actually, Mom, I said, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. Those antique shop comments? I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about? It has offices in 3 cities. Dad choked on his drink, Aunt Kelly dropped her fork, and an uncle started coughing violently. Mom's laughter morphed into something else, her face turned red, then purple. She stood so abruptly her chair toppled over. "You have millions and you let us struggle?" she screamed. I replied, "Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month." She shot back, "While sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans." And there it was, no congratulations, no "we're so proud," just outrage that I hadn't given them more. Rachel started crying, shocking, I know, sobbing about how she deserved to know and how I'd betrayed the family. Dad joined in, "How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you." That's when I snapped. Years of being ignored, dismissed, and treated as the family disappointment poured out. "Raised me?" I said. "You shipped me off to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone because Rachel might feel left out. You never saved a cent for my college but took out loans for her private school. And now you're mad I built something for myself?" The next 5 minutes were pandemonium. Mom screamed about family obligations, Dad yelled about ungrateful children, and Rachel alternated between sobbing and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the high-end catering team tried to serve dessert, looking painfully uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop, slung my Hermes bag over my shoulder, which Mom had once praised as a nice replica, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Mom discussing how to spend my money, something about Rachel's MBA and a new car. Driving home in my understated car, a limited edition BMW, my phone exploded with texts. The family group chat erupted. Rachel took to Facebook, posting about hidden family wealth and her selfish sister. The aftermath was like watching a cyclone hit in slow motion. Except the hurricane was my family, and the debris was my sanity. Within an hour of leaving dinner, my phone had 47 missed calls and over 200 messages. Mom's texts followed a curious arc. 7:42 p.m., "How dare you walk out on family?" 8:15 p.m., "We need to talk about this like adults." 9:03 p.m., "Your sister deserves a share of your success." 10:30 p.m., "I've already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods." 11:45 p.m., "Why aren't you answering? This is your mother." Rachel, meanwhile, went full social media warrior. She posted a lengthy Facebook rant about how her millionaire sister hoarded wealth while her beloved family struggled. The comment section was wild. Distant cousins and high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years chimed in. Suddenly voiced strong opinions about my moral character. But what really struck me was Rachel's post. All those years of me trying to help Sarah's career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly wealthy. The betrayal hurt so much. I nearly hurled my phone across the room. The only career advice she ever gave me? Suggesting I try selling jewelry on Etsy. If you're unfamiliar with flying monkeys, they're the people toxic family members send to guilt trip you. Aunt Susan, whom I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to remind me that family is everything. Uncle Bob, who I'm pretty sure still thinks I'm 12, emailed a lengthy lecture on the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister, how did she get my number? Felt compelled to share her thoughts on family obligations. But the real chaos started when they showed up at my workplace. I arrived Monday morning to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel in the reception area. They told Jenny, my receptionist, they had an appointment for authentication services. Rachel clutched her Michael Kors bag as if it were actually valuable. The conversation went about as expected. Mom said, "We've discussed it as a family," I interjected, "A family discussion without the family member you're discussing?" Mom, ignoring me, continued, "And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone." Rachel chimed in, "I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly." Dad added, "And your mother and I want to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida." I said, "Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 monthly?" Rachel snapped, "That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us." I replied, "Owe you? For what, exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons?" Mom said, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything." I shot back, "No, I gave myself everything. And you know what? I'm done." Right there in my office lobby, I pulled out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom gasped as if I'd slapped her. Rachel started her fake crying routine but stopped abruptly. When she realized her tears weren't working, things turned ugly. They refused to leave, and I had to call security. Watching my 60-year-old mother being escorted out while shouting about ungrateful children was surreal. Jenny asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, but I had their names added to the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks, new phone numbers, fake email addresses, even attempts to reach me through my company's customer service. I finally issued a formal legal notice threatening harassment charges. Mom played her last card, she called Grandma Marie. But Grandma Marie, wiser than all of them combined, responded. Good for Sarah. About time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. Mom didn't speak to her for 2 months after that. It's been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I moved to a new home with enhanced security and changed all my numbers. The company? It's thriving more than ever. My family drama even attracted high-profile clients who admired my discretion in the situation. Rachel, I hear, is posting passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal, and is apparently starting her own jewelry authentication firm. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad stopped contacting me after my lawyer sent an official letter detailing how harassment charges would impact their lives. Now they're telling everyone they never wanted my money and are praying for my salvation. The best part? For the first time, I feel free. No more Sunday dinners filled with subtle insults, no more downplaying my achievements to spare their feelings, no more funding the Rachel show. My therapist says I'm finally setting healthy boundaries. I say I'm finally living authentically. That's my story. Thank you for letting me share it. Special thanks to the catering firm, who sent me a Christmas letter saying that Thanksgiving meal was the highlight of their year. Edit. Responses to common questions. Yes, I'm still in therapy.no, I don't regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Marie is doing well, she's visiting next month to help me catalog a new collection. One last thing for Rachel, I know you're probably reading this. That Cartier bracelet in your latest Instagram post? Definitely a fake. Just saying. Thank you for reading. If you haven't followed yet, please do, and stay tuned for more surprising real-life stories happening around you.